Well, they didn't have the time, but they recommended somebody else. So that could be the case that maybe Murray Strauss wouldn't do it, but maybe Murray, we know how many postdocs that he's had over the years, so he knows many people who have lots of publications in the area, and he's a wonderful guy who would help you find somebody.
Is it fair to say that that some of the networking that you did, even as a graduate student, is networking that pays off today, dividends as far as your collaborative work?
Absolutely. Yeah. The University of New Hampshire Domestic Violence Conference, I've been going every year since 1987. And when I go, or sometimes they have it every other year, it's like AMFT, only much smaller, and then I know everyone. I don't know everyone at AMFT, but among program directors, I know pretty much everybody. And among the domestic violence researchers that go to New Hampshire, especially the ones that do treatment research, we all know each other. It's from going to those conferences, sometimes giving posters, sometimes giving presentations, but always going up afterwards and talking to people about their work and getting excited about it. And nothing we love better than hearing somebody who's really passionate about our work.
That's right.
It's you think it's a burden to bother people. I think sometimes students think, but it's such a compliment.
I'm not
exactly.
worthy to talk.
That's what I think. Sometimes people think, well, I don't want to go up and tell Murray how much his international domestic violence, dating violence study has meant. Well, it's a compliment. It's an honor. It's so many times we send our work out and it's just sitting in a journal. We have no idea if anyone ever reads it. So when somebody comes up and says, I've read your work and it's really helpful in me and my thinking with my work, it's all good.
Yeah. Okay. Very cool. So obviously the importance of collaborating. Do researchers get to the point? Does a big name like Murray Strauss, could he send in a grant and just because of his name get funded and be a lone ranger on a federal grant, or is that less likely to happen even for somebody with that kind of history and notoriety?
I can't imagine that he would ever want to or choose to
be alone.
Ranger. It is. One thing I absolutely believe that grantsmanship is absolutely a joint project, that you've got to work with collaborators who are passionate, strong, and like in my work with my colleagues Eric McCollum and Karen Rosen, Eric had been at Purdue and he had helped develop a treatment manual for Bob Lewis's substance abuse grant, and his area was in substance abuse. And Karen Rosen, my other colleague, she loves qualitative research. She's a wonderful, careful, qualitative researcher, and also interested in domestic violence, but more from a victim perspective at that point. So the three of us got together. She added this strong qualitative piece. He had experience with a large grant before working with Bob Lewis at Purdue, and then I had the publications in domestic violence and the interest in there. So the three of us just really were a wonderful team. We had, when you supervise all those therapists and you work on fidelity, one person alone, I can't imagine that you would want to be alone, even with students or research assistants, because they leave, they graduate, they move on. This project that we've been doing started in 1997, and it's 13 years that
later.
We're continuing. Eric and I, we have 2 papers coming out this year, new data. We're continuing to work with the couples. We're doing training all over the country. So we had students working on the project, but they've graduated, they've moved on. And so colleagues, and they don't have to be necessarily domestic violence colleagues. They may be statistics colleagues who might get really excited about what way you could analyze that data, but they get passionate and you include them on publications and you include them. You don't just take from them and give them nothing back. You make sure that that they feel like they're part of a team, not just a consultant that comes in and never walks out. I'm talking about people at your university,
right.
Especially.
But you've also had a number, like you said, a number of students, and they kind of move on. Do you keep some of your former students? Do they become part of the team after they're done, or does that typically happen? Or do they kind of chase their own dreams? Or
I think they've typically chased their own. I published with many students and many graduates while they were working on their PhD that we continued to work on papers, but then they've kind of gone off on their own, and they call me as a mentor, but not I haven't really continuously done co-authoring with graduates.
That's interesting because you and Eric and Karen, when you were, when Karen was still with us, and you had such a synergy at Virginia Tech Falls Church for doing that domestic violence research. And my guess is you attracted a lot of students for that. And there are some training programs that will move away from being so focused in one area. Like sometimes when there's a faculty position available, some people will think, well, I can't really work there because they already have family violence researchers. Do you have thoughts on that? Do programs sometimes falsely avoid hiring maybe a person that really might strengthen one area, but of course other areas might be less strong? Or
I think that's a really good point. For me, I had, when Texas Tech, they had a number of they ended up with a group of domestic violence researchers. To me, they are really poised to be able to do some really important research in domestic violence. And I think that's a great thing that they hired several people who have a passion in that area, or depression, or substance abuse, or whatever. As long as they weren't all so narrow that they couldn't teach ethics or MFT research or all the other courses that need to be taught. But because everyone can't just teach domestic violence,
sure,
of course.
right.
But most of us have some depth and could teach a variety of things. But if our research was focused, we'd be much more likely to be able to get federal grants. But what I'm doing now at K-State, I'm the only domestic violence researcher at the university, as far as I know. But I'm working with teams of students who are excited about doing the research. So that's really fun, because at Virginia Tech we only had master's students, and so they were beginning researchers. And so now I have PhD students who come out of strong master's programs who are excited about doing research also. And so that's another model, and that's working for me. But I don't think we would have ever started it without colleagues who were also
similar,
equally, Eric was totally responsible for quantitative data, and Karen totally responsible for qualitative. We all worked together, we all supervised, and then I was basically responsible for all the communities networking and getting the clients to come in and overseeing the treatment manual and model. But I didn't have to go and think about all entering the SPSS and code books and the qualitative and who's going to do the interviews and who's going to transcribe them. So, and then along with running a program and teaching and service and all the other things you do. So having a team is so much better than, even with students, you're still overseeing everything. But with equal colleagues, I wasn't having to look over Karen's lap to make sure that, did she get the interviews done?
Right.
Did they ask the right? Yeah, I didn't have to look to see that or guide them or mentor them. So that was perfect.
I think one of the things